really wanted to build a brand to give content creators their own shoes. I think it's the most undervalued segment
Mm.
today for like endorsement deals. Most of these content creators, like if they get a deal, some of them have already hit points where they're way bigger brands than athletes, like Mr. Beast, like Jake Paul, as a couple examples. But they never get treated the same way.
Everyone asks me this question, so I'm going to ask it to you. Why did you start Legends and Leaders? What's the origin story? Everyone's heard mine. I'm not going to say it, but like, what is your origin story?
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We're bringing the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward, folks. My guest today is Ben Weiss. Ben is building the future of sneakers with Sintelay, shoes designed with artificial intelligence and entirely 3D printed, accompanied by an excellent team of advisors. I think these guys know what they're talking about. Reebok founder Joe Foster and original Shark Tank Kevin Harrington and others. And he hosts a top business podcast, Legends and Leaders, which breaks down the steps of becoming successful and having a positive impact on the world. Sounds familiar, right? Isn't that why you guys are here? Why not have a show that does the same? Listen, we believe in collaboration over competition. There's enough ears and eyes for everybody. He's had incredible guests, Kevin O'Leary, Howie Mandel, Steve Madden, Miss Universe, and so many more. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here with you, Adam. Excited for this.
And thank you for joining us today. And I was talking to you for a moment before we went on air that I'm watching. I see what you're doing. And listen, they say you can teach an old dog new tricks, but I love watching other people shine, especially in this space. I really do believe in abundancy. There's enough eyes and ears for everyone. And it's about spreading the message, right? It's about spreading the good word and informing people. So before we get into it, I think it's important that we bring people up to speed on your journey. And I look over at you and I'm like, listen, I know you're a few years younger than me. And I think that there's an incredible story to be told here about what the younger generation is doing and what you're building and where this tenacity comes from. But I want to talk about where it starts. And I'm always curious, this entrepreneurial drive. What, if you don't mind me asking, Ben, what did your parents do for a living? What do they do for a living?
Yeah, so they're both attorneys. My mom's an immigration attorney. She's actually become one of the top immigration attorneys, I would say, in the United States. She's helped the former governor. She helped the governor of Arizona, was referred, I think, by a case from the governor of Arizona. She's done so many different extraordinary ability athlete cases to get them in,
Wow.
Olympic athletes that need to train in the United States. And my dad's a copyright and trademark attorney, and he's done some great work for all different types of brands. He does stuff with Honda currently at their firm. And if you're familiar with the popular influencer show, The Streamies, they also did the trademark for that. So I've been surrounded by great people, which has been really helpful, definitely early on in the journey.
Both parents attorney. Listen, I'm married to an attorney, and I can only imagine. So if I'm looking at my kids, I'm like, what's it like with your mom in the space there? But when you look now, you've gone through, college and everything, and you're looking at, where you want to go next, and you look at your parents, looking from this perspective, Ben, at this age where you are. What is that first business lesson that you took away from both of them?
Well, my dad always taught me about never giving up. And that was something that I kind of thought when I was young is a little bit of I don't know, you keep saying it and I've heard this before. Why do you keep saying this all the time? But as I got older, I realized how important it is, Adam, to never give up and have that at the core of all you do. Because sometimes it can get pretty tough. And if you give up, you're not going to make it. If you don't, and you know how to keep going, it's all the difference.
That is resiliency. And that comes with age. And if you could have those lessons now, Ben, and I promise you I'm going to stop pretending to be the old man in the room. I'm going to get over that in a second. But having those early lessons taught to you is such an advantage over other folks. You look back, though, and see where your parents let you fail during your journey. So you could have those scrapes and wounds. Do you looking back on it now, you're like, all right, I see what they did there. They wanted me to take a hit or two to see what that tasted like.
Well, they never really just kind of put me, they always try to position me to succeed as best I can, but they let me stand on my own in many ways, which I appreciated. It wasn't just hey, we're going to go just take your hand and just kind of give you these opportunities. It's
Right.
Go make something for yourself. So even when early on when I wanted to be an entrepreneur and wanted to build my own businesses, a lot of the stuff was just hey, we'll give you an opportunity to stay at home and build what you want. But you got to go figure it out, And so I think that was like a mentality that has always kind of lent to me falling if I fall, and having to figure out how to get back up if that happens, and when that happens.
When
And so resilience builds up there too.
it definitely does. When do you think that first entrepreneurial spark was? What was that
Oh, I
first
mean,
inspiration? Like, what was that first person you looked at? Like, damn, I see what they're doing over there.
well, with Steve Jobs and the iPhone, even the iPod actually was really incredible. I remember everybody. I was in. We used to go to these like camps in New York, and everyone had the DS, and the DS was like the big thing.
Oh,
And
the handheld gaming system, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
my mom, I really wanted a DS at the time. I wanted to kind of play these. You could play these games with other people too if you had a DS as well, and it was like the thing. Everyone's playing Pokemon and Mario Kart and stuff, and I really wanted to get a DS, so I had the money saved up for it, and I just was not allowed to get a DS.
Hmm.
But my parents thought it was a gaming system. We don't want you gaming on your own. Your grades are gonna go down. Things like that, right? So then the iPod was becoming really big at that time, and my mom's like, you can get an iPod if you like. You'll listen to music on it. You'll do other things. It wasn't just a primarily gaming oriented device, although the App Store and all these games, of course, happened. And that was the iPod Touch specifically, which was just a really amazing product. And so I wound up getting the iPod Touch, and that became the next big trend. But I saw like how you can, the way Steve Jobs talked about the iPod and talked about what Apple was doing. He made the technology much more than just like another computer out there. Like it was this whole new way of interacting with the world. It was a different way of viewing your reality, of optimizing your experience in life. It meant so much more. And so that was something that I was like, wow, like this is what consumer facing technology can be like. And it can be beautiful, and it can be like the most amazing luxury brands there are. I want to build stuff like that.
And having a front row seat to that piece of it. So when you moved from your formal education into the what do you call it, the adult world, were you like, damn, I got to get a full-time job, or was it always going to go down this entrepreneurial path? Because you moved into the Web3 and NFT space. So I'm curious how that came about and how you explained it to your parents.
Well, basically I went to business school, and I thought that was, you watch all these movies like the Social Network movie, you see these people like dropping out and stuff. And I was like, oh, I should just drop out of business school. But I didn't have like a real business that I was running at that point in time. So it didn't make sense. So my parents, I talked it through with them, finish school, get a business degree. So I got a strategy and entrepreneurship degree from YU in New York, which they were actually very good to me. And after that, I was like, okay, well, you're done. Now you've got to go figure something out. So
then what, right?
So I was already interested in crypto. I took a gap year abroad in Israel, and I had a friend that was really into crypto, so I started getting into it then. And the NFTs weren't around, but like the idea of like currencies competing with government currencies became kind of like a complicated issue. But NFTs was like, okay, well, this is just a digital collectible, and it's a way to actually have an authentic digital collectible. So when that started coming around, that was timed right with when I was really graduating. So I was looking at doing some other businesses. I tried some stuff, but I was really focused on the electric car space and trying to build a mass market affordable EV. It was like an ambitious plan. And I was meeting with people in that area. And I met with this guy, Malcolm Bricklin, who was the man who brought Subaru to the United States and became very successful from that deal. And we were talking about this. And through that event over there, the Ferrari designer happened to be there. And I wound up meeting the Ferrari designer, and he was like, we were talking about NFTs because I was just reading about it, and he's like, you want to do NFTs with me? So then I started getting
being there. Well, we'll pause there for a second. How, and this is an important lesson for everyone, how did you get in the same room? How did you get face-to-face with the guy who brought Subaru to the U.S.?
So that one was through my dad, he was a client of my dad's. But it's a good kind of like question to bring up, because certain people, my dad's, made an intro like that, but majority of the people that people see on my Instagram and stuff, I've just went out and met. And the way you do that is you just find places where they're at, whether that's events from Eventbrite, whether that's conferences, you find them any way you can. And it does lead to a lot of cool opportunities when you start meeting these types of people and tell them what you're up to and things like that.
Dude, I preach this enough. You have to be and meet where people are. You have to put yourself in situations to have serendipitous situations, right? Like, how do you define luck? It's opportunity and success together, right? Like, how do you define luck? People are like, oh, you're lucky. How'd you interview that person? Or I'm sure you get the same shit that I get. Like, how did you get a chance to interview this person? How did you meet that person? It's because people like you and I go out there and we make it happen. We identify somebody that we want to talk to on our show and network with them and go to where they are, or we reach out to them. How do you like? What tips would you give somebody who's going to go to an event and it could be intimidating, it could be a little bit scary, but how do you break through and approach these titans of business and industry and innovation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, similar to probably what you're doing, you just go right at them. You have to, of course, be respectful. But like, for example, you mentioned earlier, Steve Madden, we had Steve Madden as a guest on our podcast. Great guest to get on. That took probably a year to get done.
You have to be patient, 100%.
But not everyone's willing to be patient like that. I mean, I was checking
Mm.
in with his team over many months, giving them updates, and we grew a lot at that point in time. I mean, now the Legends and Leaders podcast is top 15% on Spotify. We've done like 20 million impressions, 7 million
Boom.
views. We've had some viral clips. So LinkedIn News featured us recently. So it helps, as you go, but that's about also staying in the game. Like this is that what I was talking about earlier, never giving up. Like it's really true. Like you've got to just stay in the game as long as you possibly can and just do one rep at a time with all of this
One
stuff,
rep.
with meeting people, with podcasting, with making shoes, whatever it is.
Well, we're going to get into the podcast. We're going to get into the shoes in a little bit, but let's turn that page and talk about podcasting. Why? Let's just do a little timestamp here. When was the date of the first episode?
It's now, I think, a year and 9 months ago.
All right, so we're approaching the 2-year mark, and everyone asks me this question, so I'm going to ask it to you. Why did you start Legends and Leaders? What's the origin story? Everyone's heard mine. I'm not going to say it, but like, what is your origin story?
Well, there's probably some similarities to yours, Adam, because I think one of the main aspects of podcasting is you want to learn, you want to be, willing, you want to hear stories and hear insights from people and really get to ask them the questions you want to ask them. So what I also felt was that if you look at the space of podcasting today, there's a lot of different types of people that tell stories of individuals. Especially, there's a very popular business podcast, How I Built This, that really dives into a lot of the steps in businesses. But I think that like there's two different problems the Legends and Leaders solves. One is that there isn't really a step-by-step basis that breaks down in a really succinct way, 30-minute or so bites of all the different steps of what goes into how an individual that has had a great career or in the business space, how they've done what they've done, and then what they want to do next at this point. So really succinct of all these pieces, like going through how did you specifically come up with your idea? How did your passion for this area begin initially? How did you get educated in that area? What did it take to communicate what you were bringing to life? How did you even make that? How did you get your first sale? And building up on these steps by steps. I think that's so important, especially there's a lot of young people that want to see that. So that's really a big focus. And there's so many great individuals outside of just the world of business that don't get to tell their stories. Like we had, for example, Arbany Nola on, who's Miss Universe from America. And she like found out about Miss Universe at, at just like going to a hair salon. And she almost didn't even qualify because she was out of the age range potentially. Then went and, won it all. And explain the process of how she won. And it's a whole fascinating story that probably never would have gotten told traditionally in the business space.
Right. Because you want to unpack those journeys. So take us back to that first episode. Who was your first guest?
The first guest was the CEO of the DeLorean car company at the time.
Okay. Anyone knows Back to the Future. You know about the DeLorean. It's a great business story too, right? Like, was your show... My show, I winged the first one because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It was just a Zoom call and I hit record. How much prep and planning and forethought went into the idea of the show? Like, did you have your why down? Did you have like your format down? Because I think a lot of people out there are like, what do I need to do? I'm like, just press record and freaking figure it out. But you kind of need to know at least the framework of your why. And listen, it's going to be an evolution. The podcast is a living, breathing thing that evolves and it's art. But take us back to that first episode.
Yeah. So the first episode, really came together because it just kind of like was a lot of, natural organic conversation, but I did some research. I, put at least half an hour, maybe even an hour into beforehand of just researching all the different, questions I wanted to ask him and trying to find things that he wasn't asked before that people would find out because DeLorean brand is so beloved. So a lot of interesting, fan aspects you can kind of bring into that.
Of course.
But then as I've went, it's become just much more organic conversations. And it's exactly what you're saying, Adam. It's go out there and just hit record and talk to people. But you still need a framework, I think, every time. So we do develop a framework.
And I tell people too, I do my research. I've been doing my research since day one and it's evolved where early on I was much more reading the questions. And I remember I was like 20 episodes in and I had a friend, an advisor, and she's like, Adam, I could hear you thinking about the next question that you want to ask your guest. I could hear it in your head. You're not listening to the guest. You're not giving the opportunity to make a left turn, make a right turn, go down that rabbit hole. Because Ben, that's where the gold is, right? The gold is in the shit pit of somebody's story. You and I both interview people that are on many shows, and they're going to try to get their sound bites in, and they're going to say things that they've said before. So how do you find those moments to kind of go down the path? What was one of those tough lessons that maybe you really didn't think about with podcasting that you learned the hard way early on?
Well, I mean, look, you really learn a lot about people that you aren't aware of. You know, if you really ask the right questions, you get a whole different. Some of these people that I've had on, I've gotten like a whole different perspective of them than what I've seen in the media and what people have talked about. And I was just not aware of that. And so you have to be able to handle those changes kind of on the fly. You know, and some guests, like you've probably seen this too, Adam. Some guests talk more than other guests. You know, like I've had a guest on before where I expected answers that would be, longer than a minute for certain questions. And then the answers are like 10 seconds long, and they're super short. And you're like, wait, I've only prepared so much material, so you have to be versatile and adaptive. And it really pushes your speaking skills.
I think to that point, it's the muscle of the brain, being able to improv, be able to keep it going, be able to just go off on tangents, but always have the framework. Literally, I have a bullet pointed framework. These aren't necessarily exact verbatim questions I'm going to ask Ben, but it's a roadmap of where I want to go in this journey. Because at the end of the day, your listeners' auditory experience is what's most important. If you don't have any listeners, you don't have a show. If you're doing the show for Ben and I, right? If I'm doing the show for myself and Ben, I'm not serving the listeners who are listening to this any good. I want to give them a good experience. I want to bring out the best of Ben so they're learning something from him. So I have a responsibility as a host. How hard was the consistency part of the production and getting a new show out every week? Like, did you have to develop your own systems and processes? Let's talk a little inside baseball and lift up the hood here.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. But it's not as much work as this kind of progressed. I mean, now we have a good system of getting it going. I mean, look, part of the, I'm sure you've seen, Adam, it gets to a point when you do your podcast, you're the one, it's like an uphill battle. You're the one trying to get all the different guests on. And if you do a good job, enough of a good job, you start getting pitched. And then you have to manage the pitches because there's
all day long.
People who want it on. Yeah. So it got to that point and we were getting amazing pitches. And so now it's trying to make sure we stay on time with releases is probably the toughest piece of it, because there's just so many different people that want to come on and that reach out and things like that. And just trying to manage all of that has kind of been, left to say yes to so many different types of people. There's so many great stories that should be told, but managing that can become just quite difficult.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I come from an advertising and marketing background. So I had the process down point, right? Like I have a project management background. So everything was systematic and I have systems for everything. And I believe in the idea of batch production. I'm usually, and everyone knows this, I'm usually 8 to 9 episodes ahead. And that way I've never missed a new episode on a Friday for 6 years. And that's because I'm always 8 to 10 shows ahead. I could take 6 weeks off in the summertime and not, I like to take those breaks. Listen, I don't think people really understand how much mental energy and effort goes into having these conversations and keeping them good. And you could get burnt out. Have you felt like, even, a couple of years in, have you felt those moments when you're like, you know what? I got a couple episodes ahead. I need to take a break. I'm not giving it my best self. Maybe I'm just not feeling it. Have you hit that point yet?
Wouldn't say like that point, really that I needed to take a massive break. I mean, we've been consistent now. It's had an episode out pretty much every week since the beginning of this, I think with the exception of 1 week. So to keep that up, as long as you don't, you have to know your limits, and know what you can do. If you don't overdo it, you'll probably be fine. But yeah, I mean, definitely there's weeks where there's too many recordings, and it's this is a lot.
It's a lot.
On top of managing, because I'm also doing the podcast and managing, building the sneaker brand, and I have other things I'm involved in too. So it gets to be a lot. But I guess it's just part of that. I look at it like I'd rather be doing all this stuff than not be doing this stuff, so
all the time.
I just take it as it goes.
And just to kind of round that, I mean, we could talk podcasting for hours here and talk a little bit about how this podcast has built your brand, the Ben Weiss brand, the Legends and Leaders brand, and how critical that is. Like, would you have the name recognition? Would you have, this? You wouldn't have this without a podcast. I tell people all the time, I go, this is what's launched me in my career as a recruiter and put me on these stages and put me with these audience and got me those sponsors. Otherwise, I would just be a regular recruiter. Recruiting's my day job. I have a recruiting practice. How has this propelled you for the relationships? I'm going to get to your relationship with Joe and building out Sintelay in a moment. Like, you think you would have any of these without a podcast?
It's a really great question. And, Anthony Pompliano has a podcast. He talks a good amount about the importance of building relationships through podcasting and the benefits. And I remember hearing Gary Vee talk about this too. This is before I started. And he was he made some comment once, look, I can pretty much ask anybody to come to my podcast if they're building a new exciting project, get them on, and I could talk to them about whatever, and or even just meet with them. I think he was mentioning something like that too. And I was like, wow, that's a really incredible power to have, where you can, sometimes if you reach out to somebody, you want to just talk to them, they may not talk to you. But if you have a podcast and you've had X individuals on and it's gotten some credibility, they'll talk to you. And then you can form a relationship with them that may not have been possible without that. I've met with so many people, and sometimes it's funny. Man. I've reached out to people sometimes with other things, never heard back from them, and then they come to my podcast, and then I build this great relationship, and I've had these relationships for a while with some, and so many great business opportunities have come out of it, but also the knowledge is just incredible. I've learned things that I've never seen anywhere else that have really changed the way I view the world.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you could learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you. You know what I like to say? This is my masterclass. And Legends and Leaders, your masterclass. And we're curating this masterclass, and we're giving it away for free. And I always joke with people, I got 400 hours of a masterclass here. If you want to speak to this founder, this executive, this celebrity, this athlete, this person you never heard of, but they have the most incredible life journey and what they built, this is here. And you and I, learn from osmosis. But you hit the nail on the head of something. My podcast and your podcast, anybody out there, here's the secret. Actually, it's not a secret. This is our Trojan horse for opening up relationships. This has given me recruiting business, other opportunities, other businesses. So on that subject, how did you meet Joe Foster, founder of Reebok?
Yeah, so it's a whole story with Joe and Julia's wife and how that happened.
Let's give the Cliff Note version.
Yeah. So basically, I was working on something in the footwear space previously with the rapper Lil Durk and building out an NFT and physical shoe brand. Yeah, and that was the idea is let's go try to back other people in hip hop and take this type of product you can wear digitally and physically. And it was my idea and I originated it, but I didn't have full control over that. And I didn't really agree with some of the direction of where it was going. Wanted to do things differently. So it was going to branch off anyhow. And really wanted to build a brand to give content creators their own shoes. I think it's the most undervalued segment today for endorsement deals.
Interesting.
Most of these content creators, if they get a deal, it's like a promotional, they're viewed as digital.
Like an ad, they're just repping an ad. Yeah,
exactly. But they're becoming brands. And some of them have already hit points where they're way bigger brands than athletes, like Mr. Beast, like Jake Paul, as a couple examples. But they never get treated the same way. And half the youth today views them as the people they want to be, that they look up to these people. And that's how athletes used to be viewed. And all the big 4 or 5 brands, Puma, Nike, Reebok, Adidas, et cetera, these are all born and bred in athletics. And they've tried to do some lifestyle work. They have done well with some of that, but that's not their DNA. And we've seen 3 different transitions in this category of footwear. We've seen the embracing a basketball player with their own shoe with Jordan and others. And then we've seen that now shift towards you don't have to be an athlete to have your own shoe with hip hop. And then now we think it's going to be a third wave with content creators, with YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitch stars. And so we want to be at the forefront of that. So that's why I pitched Joe on. And I just reached out to him online cold.
Really?
And said to him, we'd love to do this, said to his wife, Julie. And then they said, we're happy to meet and talk about it and explain to them the vision and how big it could be. And, they like to be very, they like to jump on things and do things different. And I read Joe's book, Shoemaker, great book on how he built Reebok he took it to literally from an idea and just getting started with like a machine in their factory. Like they had their own factory machine, and it like they basically had like no money getting started, and just went around trying to put running shoes on people to taking it to #1 best selling in the world, better selling than Nike. And so I read that book and I was like, I got to get this guy. So he came over to Fort Lauderdale, visiting friends, family, and met with them a couple of times. And then him and his wife Julie were like, let's do it. And we were ready. And then once you had Joe on, a lot of other people get interested too, and helped us attract other things. And yeah.
So let's talk about it, Sintelay. What is this idea? First of all, they look pretty cool. Definitely space age looking, but what's the story and the concept here? What are they slides, and like how are they designed? And you talk about AI. What does it mean that you're even using AI for footwear?
Yeah, so it's a good question.
A lot to unpack. That's like we call that in our business a 10-part question.
Yeah, it's there's a lot going on here, but basically what we've done is we've made the first commercially available AI design shoe, and what that means is that it's a shoe that majority of it is designed by AI. And that's broken into 3 major stages. The first stage is conceptualizing what you want to make. So generally when you're coming up with a new shoe design idea, you have sketches made and then you refine the sketches and so on and so forth. That's a process. We instead just generate images with Midjourney, an AI image generation software, and come up with the right.
What's the source? Like, what's the inspiration source?
We were looking at doing something around yachts and spaceships, so we can have this futuristic feel, but then also keep it classy.
That's kind of now that I hear that and I look at the image of it, I'm like, if a yacht and a spaceship had a baby, little yachty, right?
That's what it now looks like.
Yes.
But so then we generate these AI images, and then we did refine those even more. So then we did a sketch based on pretty much the AI image generation area we were at. So it was a much faster process. We had a designer do the sketch. And then we had that sketch put into a software with AI that generated a 3D model based on this. So that also took us way less time. And then we had patterns and textures generated all around that with another AI model. So this is like the fastest way in the world to make a shoe that we have today, and it's the most efficient way. And we have a great designer, Kadar Benjamin, who did that. That's excellent. And then so it's a first of its kind product. And the whole thing is 3D printed, and so it's printed out of plastic, but it's designed really smart internally, so that it's soft and comfortable and has some give to it. And that's done by Zellerfeld, our factory partner with this. And they just came off of doing Nike's first 3D printed shoes. So we got the right guys.
How is that iteration process? How is that like learning of materials for you and the thought process behind it?
It's a good amount of learning, but it's not really like the biggest area I have to be focused on, Adam. Like this is one of the things that Joe is great for, to have as an advisor, founder of Reebok. Is like, he's kind of explained to me where I need to be at. And what I have to be at is really overseeing everything from a business standpoint and putting everything together, which is what I've done here. And he's like, you don't need to be a shoe designer. You don't need to dive into all those intricacies. Just you make the product and then figure out how to get it sold. And so that's kind of where I've been at. So I've learned a lot from him, and we've had probably, 50 plus meetings. He's been super generous with his time. Like it's the most generous he probably could be,
Think about what you are doing right now. You have literally, through the skill and ability to network and this podcast and just your inner tenacity to reach out to a legend. He doesn't need to talk to you. He doesn't need to do this project. Right? But you've built that rapport. You've built that relationship. You've excited him. Somebody who's been there, done that, and built it has something that excites him. That is incredible. And to have him at your back and 50 plus meetings and the work, access to a true expert legend in the space. I mean, this is your B school. This is your masterclass. Where do you see the potential here with Sintelay?
Well, I think it has a lot of potential. It has potential to become a #1 brand, and because of a couple of reasons. One is that if you look at the content creator space, Adam, there's more people that have gained audiences and fan bases that are content creators than there are professional athletes in top sporting leagues in the world.
Really?
And if you look at the athlete space, there's really right now one predominant league. It's not even the biggest league, by a lot, that's selling these shoes that people wear in lifestyle, which is basketball. I mean, soccer or football is way bigger. So, this space, this content creator space is huge and with a lot of opportunity. And there's a great chance to really build something around that to make it a #1 brand. We have some other cool things we're working on. But we think there's a great opportunity here to to be this lifestyle first brand that embraces really where Gen Z is at. And we're also looking into doing a lot of stuff with in-game integrations. That's a big part of what we're interested in, wearability in game, because those are becoming the next social networks. But Joe's definitely been invaluable. His wife Julie's been incredible, too. And I've also got some great advice from Kevin Harrington, who was on Shark Tank for the first couple of seasons. He was the one who helped shape the influencer marketing model for the Celsius drink. And he was recently on the board of Celsius and helped take it to where it is today. And he's done over 1,000 products in 100 plus countries, about 5 to 6 billion sales.
I mean, the guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah. So that's an incredible.
You can say that again. Is the idea with Sintelay, if I'm reading this correctly, you have your proof of concept, right? You have the first model out there built on this idea of spaceship and yacht, right? Is the idea to work with a big name influencer, whoever they are out there, and create that piece of footwear based on their input using AI, where it speaks to their brand, their name, their audience, what they're looking for, and just take that iterative process to the next step by utilizing the technology and expediting it, new ways of production, new ways of distribution.
Yeah, it's definitely to get to that point. We view it as a two-stage process, Adam. Stage one is because this process of making shoes with AI and 3D printing is not super scalable. It's maximum a couple thousand pairs, and it's not cheap to make the shoes. These shoes are could be $100 to make a pair of these shoes. They're really expensive, but they actually get us the ability to test something without the typical mold expenses, which are even bigger than all of that in the end of it. So we view this as like bring an influencer in, make a shoe, and then put it out there. If it does well, and we go to traditional production and then build something scalable. We also have some other innovative product designs we're working on that aren't dependent on influencers that we think could do really well too, and that the market really hasn't seen anything like that yet. So it's a brand that's going to be focused on the creator space for sure. But right now we've got this really unique process that gives us an opportunity to back new age brands and influencers. There's so many brands out there that have incredible fan bases,
so many likes here,
but they never get to do shoes across the board. And none of the big brands, if they won't give them a shot because it's too expensive to invest in molds and take a risk, and it takes 18 months to get a shoe out typically, we're able to make a brand new shoe and release it in 3 months with our method. So it changes
speed to market, right? Like you're relevant. Like, listen, sometimes people have their 15 minutes of fame. Some people have it a little bit longer, but if you're able to capitalize that in the moment, that's really what the key is. What was one of those first lessons that you learned the hard way? Again, with this shoe company, like you're going full speed and all of a sudden, whoa, we got to slow down for a minute there. Like, was there maybe a hypothesis that you had that was proven wrong by the market?
I mean, look, it's just about working with people. I've learned a lot, about who you work with and picking the right people. I had a lot of learnings from my first experience, and then now I'm learning a lot too. And I've really structured the right team around me internally, which has been so important. And I've had a lot of help with that. My dad's been very helpful with picking the right people, and so I've been appreciative of all of that. But I think I think just now it's like figuring out how to build something to scale is the biggest thing, because I'm seeing just how much work goes into pushing out what we're doing now, which there's a lot more to come. We've just done 5 other interviews that are supposed to come out because it's fully rolling out next week. But I've just seen like the level of effort, and now I have a better understanding of like how much this takes. And so seeing how much the focus now needs to be on something super scalable that we can build off this and then keep going. I get that now.
Continuous learning, right? And I think you probably have picked that up from a number of these interviews that you've had with, legends, right? Always be learning. Always have that like mindset of being a continuous life learner. And I think that applies to all these leaders and being humble there. I can't believe I'm going to ask this question because I hate when people ask it to me. Who's been your favorite guest so far on your podcast? I hate this question. I hate this question because you're probably thinking the same thing. Like, yeah. But I was like, screw it. I'm gonna ask Ben this question.
It's a tough question. I don't know if I'd say there's one, but I could point to just a couple great episodes.
Or maybe fine. Let me help you reframe that. What has been some of your more enjoyable conversations and why?
Yeah, there's been so many. The one we did when I did with Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. That was a great one. I mean, because Kevin, I spent 2 years building a relationship with him. We both spoke at a conference in New York, the Future Crypto Conference, and I met him at a different event a family friend did earlier on. And then he decided to come on the podcast, and we talked for, it was almost an hour of his time, which I appreciate. He gave me that much time. Wow. He would pay a lot of money for that. And I mean, he just revealed like a lot of the dynamics that made him who he is today. He has this one story about like becoming, when he was told, he was working in an ice cream shop, he was told that, you have to go and scrape the gum off of these tables and stuff. And he's like, no, I'm a scooper, not a scraper. And at that point, he realized, if I want to control my life, I've got to go and become an entrepreneur. And just like
Scooper and not a scraper. Yeah.
yeah, scooper, not a scraper. So there's a lot of dynamics. That was a good one.
Is he cool? Is he cool? Is he cool in person? Like, or is he like what you see on Shark Tank and like abrasive and like the Mr. Wonderful kind of alter ego? Because he's extremely like, I mean, he's a Renaissance man himself too. I follow him. His music prowess is incredible. Great guitar player, huge wine aficionado.
He's somebody that, like, when I had this impression of him from Shark Tank. So when I first went up to him, I thought he was going to be this like mean, tough guy. But he was like the nicest guy, and I was kind of actually taken back by that. Like, wow, like this guy is like really nice guy. I did not expect this.
You hit the nail on something that I'm sure you're going to agree with. I have found, and this is my scientific data based on doing this for 6 years, that some of the most successful people are the most generous with their time. And some of the folks that either reach out or engage with that may not have the same level of, we'll call it success, monetarily, financially, however you want to look at measure success, are sometimes jerks. And I find it so fascinating. I'm like, just wait till wait till you build up a little bit. Do you think that's an element of just being around the block and understanding the idea of just being good and giving back?
I think you've really touched on an important point there. I have seen that. It's an incredibly funny thing. And it's also a funny thing in like the sense of booking people, right? So like sometimes you'll have somebody that's not as famous or successful that will take, won't book with you, or take a long time, or you have to keep going at them.
Right.
And then sometimes some of my biggest guests, like for example, Howie Mandel, like once I got the right way to get him, it was like 3-4 days later done. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. Like how fast that happened. Yeah. And he's pretty high profile. I mean,
right. Like I think about my biggest guests, and some of them were the easiest ones to get on. I mean, they weren't, it took effort and work to get to that connection. Let's be very clear with people out there. It takes us reputation and putting in the work to be able to reach out to these people the right way. But then when you have that access, they're just generous with their time here. So what's next for you with the podcast? Where do you want to take it? Where do you see it evolving to?
Well, I want to keep going with it and be consistent. And so I've definitely been able to do that, which has been great. I really want to just tell a lot of stories that haven't been told, and try to find some of these amazing guests. Like there's so many people, like that's part of the niche of Legends Leaders. There's so many people that I've spent time trying to get in touch with, like never do podcasts or not much. Like we had the CEO of Chuck E. Cheese on, David, but I'm not sure he's done any podcasts or that many at all. And we had some great clips there that had hundreds of thousands of views. We just did one that's going to come out soon with the guy who invented the Super Soaker and became the best-selling toy in the world. That's one you probably have never heard of really happening. And it's not easy to get those to happen, but those are important stories to be told. And I don't really see them being always told. So trying to just find that. Like we did one recently also with the guy who invented the digital camera and is in the Inventors Hall of Fame. And that's a pretty interesting story too.
Right? Yeah,
so
I mean, these are legends, pun intended here. So let me ask you this though. What is keeping you up at night? What worries you? Does AI scare you? Does generative AI, like what's keeping you up at night?
I wouldn't say I have any worries. I just want to build this new brand Sintelay into something that's has an impact, positive impact, and does really well financially too. And so just getting to that point has just been such a big focus. I think the podcast it helps, and I would encourage anybody to start a podcast as long as you've got a good niche and you really are going to go at it. Like it's an incredible way to get ahead and to learn. And I've learned so much, and I'm sure you have too. And just trying to be consistent with all I do and hopefully do some good with it and inspire some people. It would be great.
That is what it's all about. So let's bring it home here, Ben. What is that single greatest piece of advice that you have received, whether it be from your parents, friend, or maybe even a podcast guest, that you take action on daily? That's really actionable.
Treating everybody like how you would want to be treated, I think, is the most important, especially like now. I mean, you've had some great high profile, people on your podcast. I have too. I've met a lot of these people at this point. I try to treat everybody the same with the same level of respect. Whether that's responding to people's messages or emails or notes, regardless of how successful or not, I'm trying to just at least, be there. I've really put some effort into doing that, and I do it every single day. Just because, like, if you think about it, like, I mean, I remember some people have not treated me like that, and I hated it, and it's
Oh,
like, just treat people like they're humans. So I'm like, I'm going to hopefully be the difference there.
I love that, man. There's nothing worse than someone treats you like shit for no reason. You're like,
Yeah.
bro, I didn't even like. What the hell did I do? Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, why do you have to like? And the older you get, and the more you experience it, you realize it's more of a reflection on them than on you, right? You're like, because you realize, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't rub them the wrong way. Maybe I caused somebody on a bad day, and you try to give people grace along the way. But then when you see it happen more than once, it's a pattern, right? And that
Yeah.
says a lot about them. So when I started the show, Ben, I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out or anything. The first, I would say, almost 3 or 4 years, I would always finish my final question, my encore, whatever the hell you want to call it, with talking about the North Star. What is most important to folks, and I morphed it into my final question, because for me, it really goes back to this masterclass idea and this collection of responses here. So, Ben, how do you, at this stage of your life, define success? Ben Weiss, what does success look like to you?
It's a great question. Right now, it does include a financial component. Right now, I would say, but overall, it's based on like an impact. I wouldn't say like impact necessarily like what people say in like this media and kind of society today. Like more just like doing something positive that does like some good for the world. And there's a lot of ways to define what that means. But I think if I've achieved that and done something that's big and successful and they go together, that would be really amazing. Like you could say, like, if you look at the stuff that like, let's just say like what Elon did with SpaceX, how many people are now inspired to do stuff space related. And we saw like what NASA came out of NASA with all that they did with space. I mean, we got the drill, we've got never film, we've got so many amazing things that have changed our world, the way cameras are done, like just kind of doing something that I think leads to a lot of other positive things would be, very successful. And I'd be very happy with that. And I think I get some great notes that have come in from legends and leaders, and people have dropped some great comments and things like that. And that makes me happy. It's exciting to see it. Yeah.
Feedback loop, man. Well, I love it. And I really, really enjoyed this conversation here. Ben, thank you so much for joining me and your audience, and you're generous with your time and your knowledge and your wisdom. I want everyone to check out Sintelay.com. We're going to link it up in the comments there, and check out Legends and Leaders. You could find it wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We will link that up in the show notes as well. Did I miss anything? Where else could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to connect. Any social media really is awesome.
Well, we'll see if TikTok's around by the time this show comes out. There.
No.
Well, Ben, hang with me for one moment here as we sign off. And everyone listening, if this show meant something to you, leave a review. Rating it goes a long way. You know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Check us out on Instagram at NHP Talent, YouTube /The Podcast. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search The Podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.